Welcome to the Great Beer State podcast from the Michigan Brewers Guild. The Great Beer State is a weekly show sharing conversations and stories from the passionate people who contribute to our vibrant Michigan beer community. It is made up of a mix between full-length archived interviews from the Guild's first documentary book project, A Rising Tide, Stories from the Michigan Brewers Guild, and conversations recorded in the here and now. Each episode is kicked off with a conversational update from host Scott Graham, Executive Director of the Guild, and the Brewangelist Fred Biltman, author of A Rising Tide. Here's Scott and Fred. Welcome to Michigan's Great Beer State podcast. We're here into spring of 2021 with episode 6. Welcome my good friend Scott Graham, Executive Director of the Michigan Brewers Guild. Hi, Scott.
Hi, Fred. Good to see you on Zoom again today.
Good to see you, too. We're all getting outdoors a little bit more, a little fresh air, and sunshine does us all good. So spring is on the way. We're excited to welcome a new sort of format for today's episode. We're talking to the people of Michigan's brewing education programs across the state. So that's exciting. And as per usual, thought we'd check in and see what else is going on around the Great Beer State.
Well, here we are as we record this. It is spring of 2021. I think, we're in a third wave of COVID, although there's quite a bit of vaccine and vaccinated folks out there. So, the curve is going up very much like it did in the fall. And as our positivity rates and hospitalizations, but they're not going up. There's a gap between where they were in the fall, which I think is a result of the vaccine, which is good news. And I'm hopeful that this wave is going to follow a similar curve as the one in the fall, which would mean that it's starting to turn down, and it looks like it is, but we'll have to wait another week or two to confirm that. So again, it continues to be problematic and wearisome and tiresome. Restaurants are doing their best to hang on, although even the governor made a request, not any kind of mandate recently, that to have schools and school sports and restaurants take a 2-week pause, at least for in-person dining or inside dining. Outside still encouraged. So that's frustrating. I've been talking to quite a few of our members, and hiring staff is a big concern across the board for any restaurant. So it's times they are challenging, but it is spring, and I think there's some positivity out there, and I'm looking forward to a good spring and summer. We're still in wait and see mode on any festival activity. The nature of our festivals is such that, people just aren't going to wear masks and sit down and have an eating or drinking experience. They're going to walk around and drink lots of samples of beer and socialize. So we'll see. I'm hopeful that in July things are looking better, or I guess they have to be in June for us to put planning in place. And again, I'll mention the golf outings that we're planning, and if anybody's listening and interested, we've got openings for golfers and as well as sponsorship opportunities. So we're trying to do a little fundraising for the Guild and get us through this year and into next year. So we got 3 golf outings, one in June, one in August, and one in October.
Yeah, it's great. And it's such a mixed bag coming into spring, because outdoor dining and outdoor drinking is, a lot more possible and a lot more enjoyable than it was over the winter. But then there's, you just sort of take a deep breath when these numbers move around, and when when there's active discouragement of going to the on-premise sector, which includes our brew pubs, tasting rooms, and restaurants. After such a hard year and hard winter, when everybody's starting to get ready for the spring and summer season, it's just difficult to fathom, really. It's such a strange science fiction world, but I know everybody's working hard. They're working on finding staff. and working on making safe experiences. So just want to encourage everybody to do their best and hang on and keep supporting their local breweries. I'll say that for beer at home too. I just think that a lot of people have done a great deal of work to get their beer and food to go ordering put together online, takeout, and I think that's a great way to support is keep your fridges full of Michigan brewed beer, no matter where you're enjoying it. So that's my plug. It's strange, but we can keep supporting, and we'll keep having beautiful beer around a great beer state. So that seems like a good time to shift into our Brewers Dozen. We've got a tradition of moving around the state and giving shout outs to at least 13 Michigan breweries around the state. Scott, you've picked out a region up in the northwest corner of the state for the most part. You want to kick us off?
Yeah, so this is kind of focused in the Traverse City area, which is, a real great place to go seek local fresh beer. And there are quite a number of breweries right in what would be considered Traverse City proper. And we'll start with the Workshop Brewing Company.
Great place, as is North Peak Brewing Company, longtime member.
Yeah, Middle Coast Brewing Company is relatively new. They've been around for a few years. They rebranded. They were Monkey Fist Brewing originally, if you're not recognizing Middle Coast. So Middle Coast is in, they're expanding their distribution too.
All right, we've got Rare Bird Brew Pub, and Tina, co-owner and brewer, was one of our early guests in the first handful of episodes of the Great Beer State podcast, so you can check that out in season 1. Rare Bird Brew Pub.
Just down the road from Rare Bird is Silver Spruce Brewing Company. Tasty beer, fun atmosphere.
And we've got the Filling Station Microbrewery, who now is starting to be a pretty long-term member. It's interesting to see some of these breweries who, I don't know, I just remember them being new. They felt like the new brewery for a long time. It's got to be a number of years by now.
Yeah, and then Right Brain Brewery, longtime member, one of the earlier breweries in the Traverse City area.
And Earthen Ales.
Yeah, Earthen Ales is in the former state hospital property and one of the buildings in there. So it's fun to go in there and see the different businesses and get a beer. Fresh Coast Beer Works is another newer member. I think they may have gotten out of their home brewing supplies, but when I was there, it was a homebrew supply store with a little bar where they served some small batch beers. And I know they're actually working on a location move, and I think making their brewery a little bit bigger.
All right. And then over to brewery Terra Firma.
Yeah, our friend John Niedermeyer, who's been part of the scene for a long time, is heads up that operation. And that kind of wraps things up in Traverse City proper, and not far from Traverse City in Sutton's Bay is Hoplot Brewing Company.
And then you've got an additional location for the Mitten Brewing Company in Northport.
And then stretching kind of beyond the Twin Bays of Traverse City a little bit is Shorts Brewing Company, with the original location in Bel Air and their second manufacturing location as well as retail in Elk Rapids.
And then scooting over to Beulah, you've got Bros Brewery.
Yeah, part of St. Ambrose Cellars, who's known for their mead, but they also have the brewery. And that wraps up the Brewers Dozen, which is a kind of a thick dozen this week, but it's a great region to go visiting and beer drinking.
Absolutely. So that brings us to our interview this week. We kind of opened up a new format. We hope to do this more with some specialty subjects here and there, kind of a panel discussion. This one is robust. We had 6 guests plus me, and we had educators from the brewing programs that are across the state. It was really interesting to kind of grasp how quickly we went from 0 to several in terms of accredited colleges offering certificate and degree programs related to brewing and distilling. We had Brian Lindbergh of Kalamazoo Valley Community College program, Cory Emal from Eastern Michigan University, Allison Hoekstra from Grand Rapids Community College and the Secchia Institute, Dr. Cordell DEmatti from Central Michigan University, Annette May from Schoolcraft College, and Tom Block from Schoolcraft College as well. And had a lot of help from Annette putting this together. So was just grateful to have an opportunity to learn about the differences in these programs and kind of hear the passion from all these people that are helping invite more people to our industry. And I feel like another effort to raise the bar of our technical sort of overall aptitude as people enter the industry.
Yeah, I think another part of it that's interesting for me, you and I can both remember many years ago when the news stories and things around local breweries were kind of cute and fun. But as the business has developed and the whole industry has grown, it's affected so many other industries, whether it's banking and finance, professionals like lawyers and accountants, construction work. Well, we've even had, we have equipment manufacturers of different types in the state. And so it's nice to see these, other businesses that are affected and how brewing has a much broader economic impact than just what's at the breweries, and these educational institutions that have recognized they have some strengths and it would make sense to offer some courses specific to brewing. It's another cool development in the overall industry.
Yeah, and I think it points to both the skill sets and that learning and the opportunity for the entry level, I don't know about entry level, but the new entries into the industry coming in with a little more specific knowledge versus solely depending on the apprentice system, which is a big part of our industry. And then I also think the second half is it really points to the same camaraderie and networking. I mean, that was really having some deja vu in this, where it's like it felt like Hamilton Street Pub many years ago, but with educators at this point, meaning not that they had some of the same things to work through, but that they're 5-6 years into a state industry, a state approach to business, meaning that didn't exist prior to 5 or 6 years ago. So having them sort of being their own network. And I guess what I'm thinking about is that if you were interested in getting a career in the brewing industry and you hadn't found a job yet, you have another way in to be part of a network, be part of a community, and start talking to people who might have tips and suggestions and just be a good place to soundboard what role you might look for within the industry. So I think it's a really cool thing. And it goes to contributing to more access to more people to have an opportunity to find a way in.
Another interesting quirk right now is there's a program as a result of COVID in Michigan to pay for tuition for education at local community colleges if you're a local resident. So you could actually, I think I think that it applies to Kalamazoo Valley Community College, Schoolcraft College, Grand Rapids Community College. I know it does, where you could actually, if you're in those locales and qualify, you could take these programs and have it paid for, not out of your pocket. That's I think it's Reconnect Michigan is what the program is called, and it's from the state, and it's COVID related, or in the wake of all the COVID activity.
Yeah, that sounds like a great opportunity. And what I'm finding too, and full disclosure, I have joined Schoolcraft College faculty. The fact that they were moving things virtual, even though I'm a few hours away, allowed me to step into a vacancy they had and teach their marketing and business operations class. And that has been a really interesting experience for me. And one of the things that it's made more clear, I think I would have said even before the experience, is that these programs are a great opportunity to see all the different possibilities, not only in the brew house, but not only as brewer, but within all the different aspects of a brewing company. And then, like you said, all these support and supply side industries. Maybe you discover you've got a aptitude and fascination with hops, and you want to go work for a hop grower or hop broker or malt or equipment, or you name it, yeast. I think that these things can really open your eyes to the horizon of possibilities within a much broader view of our industry. So I think that's cool. And if there's programs to get you in and cover the tuition, what a great opportunity.
Yeah, it really is. Really is.
And with that, I think it's a longer than typical episode with the robust panel of passionate educators. So we'll cut right to it. Here's the crew from the Great Beer States education community. Take care and cheers.
Cheers to education.
Welcome, everybody, to the Great Beer State podcast. It's my pleasure today to have our first panel on the podcast. We've got brewing educators from across the state of Michigan. We're going to talk to each one of them, hear your stories, hear about your programs. So thank you all for joining us today. It's just a great pleasure. One of these silver linings of expanding our virtual world is that we can all talk to one another and with a lot less travel complications. So Annette, you and I have talked a lot about this, so I thought I'd start with you. We have Annette May from Schoolcraft College. Can you tell us a little bit about how you found yourself in brewing education and what the Schoolcraft program is all about?
Sure. I certainly don't mind going first, but I also just want to point out that the director of our program, Tom Block, is here. So
yes.
Anything I don't cover, he'll cover some sort of broader things than I will. But hi everyone, thank you for having us and for hosting this. I've been in beer education in a sort of a different way for about 20 years of my career. So I've been in the craft industry since 1995 in Chicago, and just Fred and I actually, go back to there as well. So mostly because, I was doing a lot of sales, front of the house and sales, and I was selling really obscure beer products that no one had ever heard of, like Berliner Weiss or Goza and Rauch beer. And, I had to be educated so I could sell better and tell the stories and understand what was going on. So that's I always had a little side gig going with beer education. And keep in mind, this is in the 90s and people weren't nearly as educated as they are now. So that kind of morphed into still doing a lot of things, working in sales, distribution, front of the house. I managed a multi-tap beer bar, and I actually went to Siebel Institute way back there because I had to manage 26 draft lines, which was unheard of in the 90s. And I didn't really understand the basis of managing a draft system. So I went to Siebel Institute and did a draft tech course back in 1999. And of course, I was the only woman there. So that kind of got me a foot in the door of draft, and I learned how to manage cask ale at the bar I was at, and blah, 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 blah. Jump forward to 2015, and I'd moved to Michigan. I was approached by Schoolcraft College. The person who started our program is no longer with us. I mean, he's retired. He's with us in the bigger sense, but he's retired. He wanted to start a brewing program in our community college attached to our culinary department. And he was reaching out to industry professionals all around the state and getting input. The thing he decided was he wanted a community college certificate program. This wasn't going to be a fermentation science degree. And he wanted all the instructors to be actual industry professionals rather than academics, or both would be fine too. But his onus was industry professional certificate program. So somewhere along the line, somebody mentioned me and that I was a cicerone and very much involved in teaching people to understand beer and sensory evaluation and draft management. Serving beer, he reached out to me to get my input on the program. What do you think should be included in this program? Do you think beer service is an important part of a program to teach brewers? Do you think sensory evaluation is? And I said, I think it is crucial. You know, brewing doesn't stop in the brewery, and I think so many people miss that. To get that pint of beer that's so beautifully created by the brewer to the customer, the way the brewer intended, takes a whole different section once the beer leaves the brewery. And I'm totally passionate and involved in that. It's what I teach across the board. So I explained all this to Rich, and then he said, well, would you like to teach these classes? And I went, oh, you betcha. So I have been with the program since the beginning. We went live fall in 2015, and I teach 2 classes. One of them is sensory evaluation and beer styles. I had the liberty to put the classes together. I felt they'd go together because when you're teaching people to taste about beer styles and you want them to taste them, you also have to teach them the steps of sensory evaluation and evaluating beer. So that's one class I teach. And the other class I teach is the 200 level class, and it's beer service from start to finish. Everything from glassware and a clean glass to pouring the perfect beer, all the way through to draft management, line cleaning, and everything along the way. I'm an advanced cicerone and a BJCP judge as well. So I have been with Cicerone. I was one of the very first Cicerones. I've been with them a long, long time. So I incorporated the first level of Cicerone into my class. So all my students come out with a first level Cicerone, which is the beer service certificate as well. So they had that external certification, but they also learn how to serve beer really well. And draft management, of course. I'm on the Brewers Association draft quality subcommittee, so I'm very, very passionate about draft quality and getting that beer to the consumer in the best possible way. So it's just wonderful to be in this program. I love every single minute of it. And the people I meet and my students are just fantastic. And I've probably talked long enough. So I guess that's about it for me. Thank you again for having me.
Yeah, it's great. It's very exciting, and I really appreciate your passion. I'm also struck by, a lot of times the thought is, especially in a beer career, anybody involved at some point has friends or family saying, oh my God, I can't believe you're in beer. And did you ever imagine? And I'm struck by, in your story, you're now working intimately with programs that didn't exist in the beginning of your career, watching Cicerone come alive, watching the Schoolcraft Brewing program come alive. I don't know exactly where the question is there, but I think, what has that path been like, watching the beer industry grow and watching education grow while you're developing your own roles? Any thoughts on what 20 years of that development feels like from your vantage point?
For me or for the
for
group?
You?
For me, it's really fascinating. Obviously, the craft beer industry has changed tremendously in the time I've been working in it. But what's really wonderful, and one thing that I really find is fascinating. So again, I went to Siebel Institute in 1999, and they had courses for brewers. And like I said, I did a draft tech skills course. But beer education just wasn't out there the way it is now. And of course, UC Davis had a program back then. And, people that were interested in beer wanted to learn, but we were very, very limited in what was available to us. There was no way I could go to UC Davis in California, and there was no way that I could really do any other kind of brewing courses at Siebel. And a lot of that was simply financial, because it's an expensive institution. And so what I've actually seen over the last 20 years is availability of education for many, many things. Cicerone organisation is one of them, but brewing education, it's great. I mean, just in Michigan alone, we have everybody that's here today, and I know, there's still, I think we are probably missing one or two representative schools as well. So just in Michigan alone, we've got 5 or 6 institutions where you can go affordably, and you have your choice of programs for education where you can learn to be a brewer, or you can learn, many, many things in a brewing program. So education has opened up, and along with education opening up is we're getting a much better quality of product. I'm not trying to say that it was not good before education, but I think it's obviously better now. Quality is much, much better. Organizations like the Brewers Association Draft Quality Committee, I mean, they haven't been around for all that time either. And, all the committees that are around there, safety committees, there's just been so much work done in improving the quality of beer across the board. And accessibility to all these things, I think, is one thing that has changed incredibly.
Absolutely. I've got one more question before we move around the horn, which is, I like what you're saying about combining sensory with beer style education. And it brings up something that was always sort of a passionate framework for me, that I feel like a lot of times from the sensory point of view, the education and the training, which is necessary, the critical tasting for brewers in a QA program is really, and then I saw it when I started judging as well, was positioned to look for flaws, which is a different experience than looking for the beauty. And we want consumers looking for, the beauty.
The beauty.
And yet we're training sensory I felt we trained sensory mostly to identify flaws. So learn about the potentially bad flavors, which I think your combination there is really addresses that. I wonder if that was part of your mindset, or if you could just speak to that, those two hemispheres of tasting, because looking for beauty can still be a critical experience, and identifying elements specific to a style or that particular beer. But I wonder what you think about that, those two hemispheres.
I think the US craft industry, which of course has extended to Scandinavia and Australia and many other countries, is very, very different to, say, the German brewing industry. And again, I'm not exactly sure right now about German brewing programs, but I know in the past, German brewing programs have been very, very technical. And well, that's why German beer is so wonderful. But they're focused a lot less on things like beer styles and sensory evaluations. Sensory evaluation of beer. I know they would be doing definitely work on off flavors in beer, but as a broader thing, and also beer styles, the German brewing ethic has always been, you can learn that after the fact. And, we technical, but keeping in mind the German brewing industry, every single brewer learns to brew, maybe a dozen beers perfectly, and they do the same beers over and over and over and over again. So in the USA, we've developed a culture of huge flavors in beer and experimental beers and creative beers. So it is really, really important that we are trained differently in sensory evaluation to somewhere, for instance, like Germany. I really like the way you said, Fred, that, understanding the beauty in beer, and I've never actually used those words, but you are entirely spot on about that. Yes, it's important to train to sense off flavors, and of course I do that too. That's part of the teaching. But to understand the basic flavors in beers, to understand the flavor that a Munich malt is different to a Pilsner malt, and I know they're very, very different, but why is crystal malt differently to Munich malt? And I really feel that a brewer really has to understand those differences in flavor to be able to create a beer that showcases those flavors. And not only that, like so many things, because we teach, because craft brewers here brew so many different styles and in so many different ways as well, adding lactose into a beer. Well, what does that do to a beer, and how does that change the flavor? So what is lactose? What does it taste like? What does it taste like when you add it to a beer? What does it taste like when you add it to an IPA versus a stout? So these are things that I really, really feel brewers need to understand flavor in general, to really, really be a good brewer. And that goes all the way to just looking at the, the way our tongue works with basic sensory. We taste sweet on our tongue and we don't smell sweet, and starting right at the beginning. And that's the way I teach. And I really feel strongly that it really, really helps brewers in the end.
Awesome.
I hope that sort of covered what I was trying to say. Because we're different here in the US than we are to some other countries like Germany, for instance. And don't get me wrong, I adore German beer. I adore it. But it's a sort of a different sensibility because of the history of German beer as opposed to the history of our craft beer industry.
Thank you very much. So we're going to head over to Eastern Michigan University. We have Cory Emal. Cory, can you tell us a little bit about how you got into this world and what the program at Eastern looks like?
Yeah. Well, thanks for having us, Fred. This is a lot of fun getting to connect with everybody like this too. My path, I think, probably like most everybody's story, is I did not anticipate that I'd end up being here doing this 20 years ago. So I came to Michigan in 1997 to go to grad school in organic chemistry. And so my sort of interest then was in kind of making molecules, and the molecules that I made, we sort of they were meant to be like anti-malarial things. And so I've kind of always come from this direction of, I'm really interested in how molecules interact with biological systems. And this eventually links up with a lot of Annette's passion here, which is just sort of this idea of taste and flavor and smell. And around that same sort of time, I was starting to go to Ashley's, which was right across the street from the chemistry building. Arbor Brewing Company was open, and I can tell you which chair I was sitting in at Ashley's when I had a Mackeson's XXX Stout, and sort of the light went on, and I was kind of off to the races in terms of beer that wasn't Busch Light that I grew up with in Nebraska. So, fast forward a long ways, I'm eventually become a BJCP certified judge. I pick up a brother who owns a brewery in Nebraska, and sort of an adult Brady Bunch situation. I sort of slowly start getting pulled into deeper and deeper this orbit of craft beer. And a colleague of mine here, our sort of co-conspirator at Eastern, Greg Wilmus, we started thinking of the idea of sort of an intro gen ed class on the chemistry of food. Just something that students could come in and take for one of the two science everybody needs. And my brewer brother set me straight, and he said, no, you know beer. This course should just be on beer. Focus on that. And so Greg and I start talking it over, and this is probably 2013 or something at this point. And before too long, we had a program sketched out, and it looks different than what we ended up sort of implementing. But we were seeing the rise of craft brewing and fermentation generally, especially here in Michigan. And we could, I still don't think we thought it would hit the heights quite where we're at today. It's just an astonishing number of breweries. But we knew that at some point there would be sort of a real emphasis on breweries and other businesses in the fermentation industry hiring in people with a real eye on quality. And so we're scientists, we wanted to kind of keep our feet where our strength was. And so we started putting together a program that really focused on the intermingling of the science behind fermentation. And so we wanted to ultimately give people who end up in fermentation and go through our program or even some of our courses an idea how to use that science behind it to help better manifest the art that they're trying to produce, right? It's like these two things go together so well. So we got a lot of internal support here at Eastern. We went out to Craft Brewers Conference in Denver in 2014, I think, and we talked to whoever would listen to us to get a bunch of ideas. And we, came back. We started studying more ourselves. So I picked up. I'm a certified Cicerone now as well. So is Greg. Took a handful of Siebel courses. Made sure that we were really kind of going on the same journey as well. And it's like anything. The more you learn, the less you realize and that never ends if you're doing it right. I think. So we the story or the program here at Eastern then really does kind of have that scientific focus. If a student goes through our major or minor program, they are taking a lot of science classes. They are taking microbiology, they're taking cellular biology, they're taking analytical chemistry. They're doing a lot of hands-on work. And alongside those courses, we have a number of fermentation-specific courses. That some of them are much more practical, that they're a hands-on brewing or a hands-on fermenting course. We have our own sensory analysis course, because I teach that one. I come at it from a slightly different angle from Annette, in that we're not necessarily style-based, we're chemical-based. So we're really sort of playing to the background that I come from, to look at how different classes of chemicals impact the sensory side of things and how they're produced and how you can control their production in a positive or negative manner. And again, it's same sort of thing. I try to make sure to not overemphasize off flavors. I try to tell students that it's only an off flavor in a certain context. There's not a lot of chemicals that you can't find somewhere appropriately. Occasionally, but even like butyric acid, once in a while, it shows up in the right kind of cheese, and it's supposed to be there. Still may not like it. So the other sort of way that we put the program together is because we wanted to try and attract students that really had a thirst for the science side of things, but maybe they didn't want a traditional chemistry degree or a traditional biology degree. But we also sort of very intentionally have designed the fermentation specific courses so that you don't need to take all of the science courses to be able to get into them and to get something out of them. If you have a strong scientific background, you'll get more out of it. You'll be able to synthesize those concepts a bit better. But we do kind of, we encourage people that, if there's someone out there in the industry now that just wants to pick up a couple of courses, they don't have to go through all the science to get into them. They can come in as a a second degree student or a stealth major in something else, and sign up and take those courses that interest them as well.
And then what are the options for them from a completion point of view? You may have said it up front, but what are they able to walk away with at the most complex to the most simple in terms of validating their brewing education?
Right. There's a fermentation science major, and so obviously that's the most complex, and that requires at the end an internship or a collaborative research project with somebody external to the university to complete that. There are minors right now that are available for students that have another science major, just because it's really tricky for us to stay true to the fermentation science part and not have them get through, say, microbiology or one of the more advanced courses. So right now, those are the ways to get a piece of paper at Eastern that says, I completed X. We've got a couple of other paths in the works right now that hopefully will get through approval sometime in the next academic year or so. These things move very slowly. as I'm sure most of us in here realize, that are either, so a concentration or a certificate that you can pick up without having to go through the full rigor of the science part of the program. But right now it's the major and the minor.
Great. Thank you very much. So I just realized we covered Livonia and Ypsilanti, 2 beer festival sites. So in our history of the Michigan brewing community, Michigan Brewers Guild. So it makes sense to head over to Grand Rapids and talk to Allison Hoekstra at the Grand Rapids Community College program. Welcome, Allison. And could you share a little bit of your story and what your program's all about?
Sure. I got into beer, kind of long story. I started in hospitality when I was 16, literally the weekend after my 16th birthday. Started as a server assistant in fine dining and was exposed to beer, or a little bit of beer, but mostly wine and food pairing from that age on, and went on to serve. And eventually started managing, tried to kind of leave the industry for a while and taught preschool, and that didn't go well. But always ended up back in the industry and always ended up kind of running the training program or leading the training program wherever I ended up managing. So that kind of led to me getting my Cicerone and wanting to pursue that education even more in beer. Started to teach classes on my own at a little craft beer bottle shop in Grand Rapids. And then when the brewing program here had an opening, I started teaching and have so far taught our fieldwork class, where we go out into the industry and see hop farms, malting houses, distributors, meet at different breweries of various sizes. And then we actually have 2 sensory classes. So we have an intro sensory focused mainly on beer styles, like Schoolcraft, like Annette said. The students get their beer certified server by the end of that class. And then we also have an advanced sensory class where they're exposed to a broader range of styles. And then we start doing a lot of focus on the off flavors. So I liked how you said the beauty and both the good and the bad of beer. So focusing on a lot of that beauty of the beer, tasting styles next to each other, learning to differentiate similar styles, but also learning those off flavors and what shouldn't be in their beer. And then I also teach our taproom class. So we have a brew pub on campus that is open. Well, it hasn't been open the last year, unfortunately, with the pandemic, but we're hoping for fall to reopen. So I teach that class too, where students who are in the program get to come out and bartend and manage and serve and really understand that aspect of interacting with the people that are drinking their beer and buying their beer. So it's a really fun class to teach. Yeah, and a little bit about our program. So our program is a certificate program. If students choose to go full-time, they can complete it in a full year. Otherwise, we have a lot of our students that do go part-time, and that is great as well. So yeah, it's mainly run by kind of like Annette was talking about industry professionals who are working outside in the industry, who have their full-time jobs and are just wanting to teach 1 or 2 classes in the program, who are also very passionate about education in the beer industry.
Thank you. Can you share a little bit about how long that program's been running and any of the history there?
Yeah, so the program has been running we're in our 5th year. So I've been here about 2 years. So we fall under the umbrella of the Secchia Institute. So the culinary program, and then we're kind of a little bit like the redheaded stepchild out here brewing beer, but still, you're laughing, I can see it. Yeah, still enjoying all the things that have to do with flavor and beer, and the culinary professors are actually great and will make us food for exploring that beer and food and those flavor options as well. So.
Awesome. Well, thank you very much. And I'm sure we'll be circling back. I love hearing both the similarities of programs and some of the sort of unique distinctions already, just having been through three of them. So I think we'll head up to Central and talk to Cordell Matei. Cordell, welcome. Would love to hear more about you and how you found yourself here and your program there.
Oh, thank you very much for having me. And it's great to see everybody together. And hopefully we can do it in person sometime. So my journey into craft beer, excuse me, kind of started with a flip comment when I was starting my PhD. I was a first-year student out at Stony Brook doing lab rotations, and my first rotation was in a yeast lab. And I asked the advisor, "Oh, a yeast lab, so you brew beer?" And it happened, he was a first-year professor. He had moved from Seattle, so coming from Seattle in the early 90s, of course he had brewed his own beer. He had all the equipment. Our department had a kitchen, so we started on Friday evenings brewing up our own craft beer and exploring all the varieties that weren't available in the early 90s. I ended up doing my PhD in that lab, of course, and we brewed the whole time. And we started an Oktoberfest with all homemade beer that is still running at Stony Brook to this day, every year. So that's how I got introduced and really found a passion for craft beer. Fast forward through a postdoc and several jobs with startup companies. In 2014, I had been working for a few years at a small startup doing fermentation for green chemicals down in East Lansing. Happened to be where I met Tom Block, who worked down there. We were co-localized with Red Cedar Spirits, a distillery. So we did plenty of chemical and beverage alcohol work. And my wife works at Central Michigan, so I had connections at Central Michigan. And in 2014, it's hard to believe with all of us here, but there were no educational opportunities in Michigan and for brewing. And the industry was becoming $1 billion industry in the state. So in the College of Science and Engineering, they were interested in how can we get a program going to get some brewing education? There's obviously a market for this, and they wanted to get it going. So they hired me as a consultant to do the tough job of driving around the state, talking to breweries, wineries, and distilleries, and seeing what they wanted. So I drove around, talked to a few dozen different facilities, and it seemed, my conclusion was that beer was the biggest booming industry. There were a couple of wine education places in the state, and the spirits industry, while growing, still wasn't huge enough that we should focus on beer. And talking to a lot of the breweries, it sounded like the ideal way to go was a certificate program, which would give brewers a background enough to get into the industry and break in, because that's where the biggest market and the biggest need was. It wasn't necessarily for the full major that we're kind of starting to look at developing now, though there is a need for that also. So we developed a one-year certificate program that's open to both degree-seeking students at Central Michigan University and non-degree seeking students. And since we're in the College of Science and Engineering, and my background is in biochemistry, molecular biology, we really do kind of focus on the science side. Though, as everybody here knows and has pointed out, it is really a balance between a science and an art. So we do both. During our introduction to fermentation science class, where we really hit the science, going through all the ingredients and everything, we start every class with a tasting covering, I think, about 18 to 20 different styles, looking for classics in that style and really trying to educate them, because at least half my students are traditional degree-seeking students. And so they're basically 21. They've tried Bud Light. They haven't really seen the diversity of styles out there. So it's really important, since they're going to be brewing these things, that they introduce and know what they're supposed to taste like and what's involved.
Thank you. And I think we'll be coming back to this question with everybody probably at the end, because it's intriguing, but hearing that story about you traveling around and deciding what is the industry, what are the breweries looking for. And I know that's a question that's asked throughout probably every program, but I just wonder, as you've been in it now a little bit, are there themes that you remember kind of seeing in those early years and that you still see reverberating today, and that drives sort of what you're hoping to deliver to a student so that they can have a leg up entering the professional world? How did you combine brewer needs and student needs? What came up most for you?
Well, I kind of start off the very first class by crushing their dreams. I tell them first thing right off, you're not going to come in and go and be the head brewer at Bell's with this. What we're hoping, I tell them right away that, yeah, the certificate is going to be important, but it'll help you get into the industry, but you're likely still going to be starting at the bottom. It might get your resume to the top. It shows that you're really focused on this and interested. But as I said, you're not going to go to Founders and replace Jeremy there. But recurring theme is when I talk to the breweries, and they really do like to see that the students have more than just a little home brewing, and that they have a good balance, not just of education, but they also have to have some hands-on experience, and that's really important. And I see almost everyone is sitting in front of their breweries here. And so we all know that it's important that not only the education, but getting that hands-on experience is truly a key factor to getting the students placed in jobs, which is our key goal.
Yeah, and it's fascinating to me, both as an industry member at the time and now in this conversation, to think about how much has transpired in 6 years, from needing to leave the state and search for programs around the country, to having a robust education community alongside the brewing community, integrated with the brewing community. It's really remarkable. So I'm just excited about this whole conversation, and thanks for bringing that to light. So we'll head to Kalamazoo real quick for Brian Lindbergh of Kalamazoo Valley's brewing program. Brian, welcome, and love to hear your story and about your program.
Awesome. I appreciate the welcome to be a part of this. This is a really cool group, and it's awesome to actually put some faces to names that I've heard so much about. My name is Brian Lindbergh, and I work at Kalamazoo Valley Community College's Sustainable Brewing Program as one of two of the full-time instructors here. My brewing experience, it's not your typical brewing experience. I tell my students this all the time. I'm lucky I did not have to work myself up from the bottom. I stepped into a position that allowed me to really have a lot of freedom and learn a lot. So how I got there was going to Western Michigan University to be a pilot. For some reason I thought it'd be fun to be a pilot, and very quickly learned that I did not want to do that. And so through general education programs and in classes, I really found a love for chemistry and biology, and ended up getting really serious about microbiology. I just really enjoyed the pathways of isolating different bacteria and yeast, and it was kind of like a criminal investigation sort of thing. So as most of you probably know, a lot of colleges are more geared towards health education. So when I was coming out, I was like, I'm going to be a public health microbiologist or something. And that was really what I wanted to do. I found that was really hard to do, and I ended up working in testing labs. I was lucky enough to get a job in a lab just testing water, food, milk, different products for different production companies, and soon moved up to Amway, working in what they call their $1 million lab on night shift as a quality manager. And that's where I really started to learn about quality systems, HACCP, and everything that goes into a major production facility. From there, I moved to Old Orchard Brands, where I was on part of their quality management team as in-house microbiologist. Not doing as much microbiology as I'd like, but we were SQF certified, and I did a lot more auditing and inspecting of the production facility, finding things that went wrong, fixing things, and doing those sorts of things. A little bit of testing, not quite as much as I wanted to do. So Was content there for about a year and started kind of spinning my wheels and looking for something new. And at the time we were selling juice concentrate to a couple breweries around Grand Rapids. And I would sit and have beers with these people and talk about the brewing industry and how cool it is. You know, you guys are doing everything I did in college, microbiology, yeast, and you get to drink beer while doing it. I drink juice at my job. That's no fun. And they saw my interest and they said, hey, we've got a brewery, friends of ours, Saugatuck Brewing Company, that they're looking for a new quality manager. Would you be interested? I said, yeah, why not? What's the worst that could happen? And so I interviewed there and somehow tricked them into allowing me to work there as their head of quality. I'd brewed, I think, twice in my life and hadn't really even warmed up to Two Hearted yet at this point in my life. So 6 years ago, I started at Saugatuck Brewing Company with very limited brewing knowledge, and I took off running. Being in the quality department, I got to write SOPs. Yes, I got to write SOPs. I'm one of those people that actually enjoys it. And got to kind of dig my fingers into every part of the process, you know, testing different things, watching a brewer mash in, watching a cellar person spin a tank. And found that I just really loved this industry and the job. And so I decided to go back to school. And at that time, brewing education was exploding. Kalamazoo Valley Community College had just opened a sustainable brewing program. And it was an hour drive from home. So I said, you know, I'll take night classes and see where it takes me. Did that for about 6 months. And the instructor at the time cornered me after class and said, hey, we need someone to put together our brewery on campus. Would you be interested? And at the time, I was like, I've barely ever brewed in my life, but what could go wrong? So I took the job and started here with about 1 year of experience in this room that, like Allison, we were an afterthought, the brewing program. This room was supposed to be a conference room and offices. And they said, hey, brewing industry is growing. Let's put a brewery in. And so we are kind of we're part of the culinary program here, but we're definitely, it seems like sometimes an afterthought. But I started here in this room completely empty. 2 weeks after I started, a very advanced German brew system was being wheeled in, and I had to fill out this entire room. And let me tell you, I learned a ton about brewing from that. Spent about 1.5 years here, got into teaching a little bit, filled in for classes, taught the hands-on brewing practicum in this room, and found that I just really wanted to be a teacher. I really enjoyed it. I love talking to people, and I have a room full of people that are forced to listen to me talk. So it's a good gig in my opinion. But I knew I was lacking the practical experience. And so I decided to leave Kalamazoo Valley Community College, and I decided to get back into the commercial world. I found a husband and wife team up in Standale, Michigan, just outside of Grand Rapids, opening the Hops Brewing Company. And they needed someone to put together their 5-barrel brew system. So I put that together, finished out the space, started making recipes, brewed there, I think successfully for about 1 year. And an opening started here and for a full-time faculty member. And I applied, got the job, and now 3 years later, I'm finishing out my 3rd year of being a full-time instructor, and I can't imagine myself being anywhere else. It's a great program. I love to learn, and this job affords me the ability to do my own research, talk about it with people that are super interested in that research, and continue to grow personally along with my program and my students. A little bit about our program here. We kind of try to differentiate ourselves a little bit by calling ourselves the Sustainable Brewing Program. We really preach sustainability, and a lot of people think environmental sustainability, right? The brewing industry is somewhat wasteful. We use a ton of water, a ton of electricity, energy. But what we also like to integrate in there is not only environmental sustainability, but economic sustainability and social sustainability, because without all of these interacting, your brewery can't function. You can be super environmentally friendly, but you might not be able to afford that with your bottom line. We need to be inclusive as breweries. We need to invite everyone and bring customers in, right? So socially, what can we do? And it's this balance that all goes together. And we really integrate that into a lot of our curriculum. Curriculum-wise, we have, I think now we're at 34 credits of pure brewing knowledge, nothing but brew-related course material. We start with Brew 100, it's Introduction to Brewing. Basically, you come in here and you learn how to home brew. So we found a lot of students. We started with a bunch of commercial brewers coming through our program, but we're moving to more traditional students now that have never brewed before. So I take them, we make in lab an extract beer. The next week we make a partial mash. The week after, all grain with a water cooler. The next week we split the class in half. One goes in the cellar with me. The other half of the class is brewing on our small homebrew SS BrewTech system with one of my lab assistants. And we just really put in a lot of hand calculations. This is how you brew on a simple scale. If they're still interested and I don't bore them too much, they come back and they take Brew 130, where it's pure ingredients. You have 2 weeks of water chemistry, 2 weeks of the malting process and cereal grains, and 2 weeks of hops. And you just really dive deep into each of these with the idea that we don't need many more brewers in the industry, as you guys probably all know. We need people to help support our brewers as well. So learn about hops, get excited about barley. You know, these are huge things in our industry that a lot of people overlook as being a cool thing. So from there, then we move into brew house operations, Brew 140, where they're in here using the big brew system behind me every week, making wort. It's wort production, wort technology. How do you do that? And the technology that's associated. From there, fermentation science with Brew 170, my favorite class, well, one of my favorite classes, where we take all those yeast nutrients that we made in Brew 140 and we apply to fermentation, flavor production, yeast management, separation and filtration, and carbing. And we have labs integrated with every single section of that is talked about. From there, Brew 230, packaging. They do everything from canning, bottling to kegging the beers in our brewery. And then 250, Brew 250 from that, where they do management and planning, quality management and planning, and basically HACCP, SQF, how to make beer with critical control points and hit those marks with a lot of statistical analysis. The last class, and sorry, I know I'm going really long here, but the last class is Brew 225, which is our capstone class. You are in the lab the entire 100% of the time. The students make their own recipes. We brew them, we ferment them, we package them, and then we put them on tap downstairs, where we have a fully functioning bar for people to come and enjoy our student beers. A couple fun classes that, you know, students can take whenever. It's Brew 110. It's the state of the industry, sustainability, jobs, what to expect coming out of our program, and what the industry is doing right now. Brew 160, my favorite, is the styles, sensory, and food pairing class. We're in there tasting classic styles, doing food pairings every day in lab, and learning about why we have styles, where'd they come from, why do we have a Munich Dunkel and not a Chicago Dunkel, and then trying the beers along with that, to give the students a good understanding of styles, but why IBUs, alcohol content, color is so important to making a proper beer. A couple other things, I just want to give a shout out to our program a little farther. We have a 30 to 34 credit certificate. That's all brew. You can step that up to an associate's degree, which is, I think, like 64 credits. So you can get an associate's in brewing science from KVCC. And then we articulate with Western Michigan University for, they have a sustainable brewing 4-year bachelor's in science and in business. And then we articulate with Davenport on the business side, and Ferris, we just set that up for hospitality. So from here, you can really spread your wings and figure out what you want to do and move on, and get that 4-year degree, or go to work and make some good beer. COVID's been crazy. I'm sure I don't have to talk about that too much with everyone here, but we were able to adapt. We actually now due to COVID, we have more lab time than we did before COVID because we had to have dedicated lab time to get our students in the brewery. So we now have at least 4 hours a week of lab for every single class that a student comes in for. In here, brewing, tasting, whatever needs to happen for that class. We do have a bar downstairs. We were able to pivot, and we still serve our student beers curbside to go. So it's been a challenging year, but part of the brewing industry is adapting, and we always like to preach that to our students, how you can be better. So I think that's
all right, thank you very much. It's exciting.
Yeah.
And so we'll shift back to Livonia Schoolcraft College and welcome Tom Block. I got to know Tom a lot more recently as I joined the faculty of Schoolcraft College, teaching operations and marketing. But Tom, I'd love to hear your story about how you've got a long history in the brewing community, and I'd love to share that story and a little bit more about what it's like running Schoolcraft program and what people should know.
Thanks, Brett. Thanks for having us all today. This is really, really cool. So I got my start as a home brewer back in the mid 1990s, and then started working at a company that's not around anymore called Micigan Brewing Company out in Weberville. Part-time on the weekends, working for free beer, and working under a couple of people, a couple of really, really good brewers. And what I didn't realize at the time is I was learning my trade. I was an engineer in the auto industry, and I was just doing it for fun. And so about 15 years ago, I said, well, I'm going to go do something I love. I went into the craft beer industry full time, bounced around like a lot of brewers do, a bunch of different breweries, and ended up at my last brewery about 6 or 7 years ago. Rich, Weinkauf, who Annette mentioned earlier, walked into the brewery that I was working at the time and had a conversation with me, told me what he wanted to do and how he wanted to create this brewing program at Schoolcraft College. And I said, well, I'm absolutely interested. He goes, well, do you want to teach one of the classes? I said, well, sure. So the class that I teach on campus is the operations class, which is the day-to-day operations in the brewery, that's where my strength is. I like working with my hands and stuff like that. So, and then Rich and I, had conversations over a 12-month period of time, and then pretty soon he says, hey, I need somebody to run the brewery on campus and also run the program. And I looked at him, I said, I think you're talking to that person. So, history, here we go, now we're 2021, and he hired me on as the director. And it's just phenomenal as far as, I get to work in a state-of-the-art brewery, and our program at Schoolcraft is a 25 credit certificate program. And similar to some of the other folks on the call here, we have marketing classes, we have the operations class, we have advanced brewing class, cellaring, and that's 2 classes that she teaches. And then, of course, Fred, your marketing class as well, and a brewing science class. So 25 credits, that's usually full-time for a student would be, 2 semesters or 1 year, they can complete that program. That's kind of it in a nutshell for us. I mean, we're similar to a couple of other folks on the call here too, but also different. So.
Neither Tom or I are at the brewery, so you can't see our brewery behind us. So, you should mention our brewery, Tom. It's pretty spectacular.
Yeah, thanks, Annette. We have a 7-barrel brew house, quality tank solutions. It's just, I can't say, it's a great brewery. It really is. It's a good space. We're also in the same building and technically the same department as our culinary program, and we do get to work together with them occasionally, and actually we're looking at even expanding that here in the next year or so, where we're going to try to get the beer into the culinary program. But it's they've been doing it the same way for 20 some years, and they don't really always want to change things around. So we're working with them. But yeah, anyway, we've got a great space.
And we also have an on-campus brew pub and 10-tap draft system and dedicated keg cooler. And I manage all that with line
Yeah,
filling
and that does a
and
good job at that. And, you know, during the COVID, we weren't able to really pivot because of, it's just a long story. We figured people weren't going to come on campus to buy beer. So we're thinking probably mid to late summer, we might be able to get the pub back open, maybe. At least that's what the president was telling me the other day. So we'll see how that goes.
All right. Thanks for the update. So I feel like maybe we'll just have some conversation here in general. And one thing that came up while hearing all your stories about all the programs is, you know, something that I've long appreciated, you know, growing up through the industry really is the rich apprentice tradition that so many professional brewers have learned their trade alongside a long time professional who took them under their wing and said, you know, here, start doing this. Like, you know, there's just so many stories of people coming in and washing kegs and ended up being a head brewer later. But I think that I guess I just want to invite people to wax on where's the marriage between that rich apprentice tradition and education, and what are the opportunities that having this robust, this rich education community in our state, what are the opportunities that adds to that apprentice tradition, and how does that relate to people that are wondering how to get started? Feel free to jump in. Go ahead, Brian.
Well, through my time in brewing, I found that a lot of our greatest brewers, they do a great job of making amazing beer. But when you start to ask them, so why are you doing that? What's going on there? A lot of times they kind of understand, but they're not fully understanding the actual science behind it. And so I think a lot of people have come up with this apprentice type upbringing where, like, yes, you turn the valve at this time, you set a timer, and these enzymes are being activated, but why and how? And I think that's where education can really step in and help with the deeper understanding of what's actually going on in these processes. And then that's how we get more consistent, better elevated quality in our great state. You know, we already have amazing beer, but if you can understand the chemical reactions and the breaking down of different things and the building up of others, that's where you start to really make phenomenal beer and a variety of beers that you never really thought you maybe could have previously. So yes, you need that apprenticeship because there's an art to this industry. You come in and there's not a ton of pay. You got to love the labor, but you come here and you learn how to be better and to take that love and turn it analytical and make the best beer possible. So I think there'll always need to be that apprenticeship. And that's why we still do our internship, because we want our students to get out there and get taken under someone's wing and see that love that everybody has for this amazing industry and get them amped to be a brewer or anything else.
I've got one to say.
Go right ahead.
So just adding to what Brian said, like, again, you know, experience is phenomenal. You definitely need it. But having that education, and I'm going to use draft maintenance as an example here. So, you know, a brewer comes in and learns how to brew something with high carbonation, something like 3.5 volumes, a Saison or a German wheat beer or something. But, you know, and again, I have students in my class and they understand the brewing side of it and they know how to break this, but they don't know what to do. They don't know how to put it on draft. They don't know how to maintain the carbonation on draft. And hence what happens when it gets to the customer's glass, it's a totally different beer because the carbonation level has changed, because it takes a lot of learning to understand how to balance a draft system. And this is one thing that I find, you know, out of everything I teach, Century is crucial as well, but understanding how to manage your beer that you created, it's your art, on a draft system, and how to properly maintain that carbonation level so the beer is the same beer, and understanding how to keep it clean. And again, you know, I speak to so many brewers, and a lot of brewers in brew pubs and brewery tap rooms get in a line cleaning service to clean their lines, which just, it puzzles me, because a brewer needs to know all these things, and a brewer needs to understand, make sure that their lines are properly clean, and should really understand the process and how to actually do the procedure themselves, because they are in charge of their beer from start all the way to the customer's glass. And that does require education.
Yeah, and you make me think about the difference between learning how to clean. Well, in addition to learning how to clean, you're learning how to confirm that it's clean.
That's
Like
true.
scientifically is different than, yeah, they were here yesterday. Doesn't necessarily answer that question. And then you brought up another thing, most people in the early stages of learning about beer start learning about what are the enemies of beer. When I think about draft beer in the keg, it's a highly protected package for beer from the enemies of beer until you tap it. So it's that one package where you're really dependent on either your own pub or a retailer's system to deliver that without, that's a big leap. That's a small step for a beer, a giant leap for drinker kind. I don't know. I haven't used that phrase yet. Anybody else on that sort of apprentice part? Go ahead, Allison.
I guess for me, I think it comes in like in the sensory portion of you need to know where you're going or where you're aiming. So I think of that as like, you can't brew a great Saison if you don't know what it's supposed to taste like, or you don't have that education behind it. Yeah, you might have tasted Saison over here or there. You might want to put your own spin on it, but really having that education of what is this style supposed to taste like, and then being able to understand how to get there, I think is what really makes you a great brewer.
Yeah, and I like what was being said about the supporting industries of brewing. And I was also just struck, maybe this heads into another question for us, is that I think that, a brewing program is a great opportunity to learn whether, which role might speak to you in the brewing industry. That it may not be brewer, and it could be cellar, it could be somewhere else in the organization or in one of the supply side industries. So I feel like no matter what age you are, I feel like the brewing programs are an opportunity to see the field of the industry and maybe start to figure out which role you'd like to point yourself towards. You guys have thoughts on that? Have you seen that in real life with students? I thought I wanted to do X. I got my education and I decided it was Y or Z.
I'll speak up on that one, Fred, a little bit. I've seen our students come through our program and they take jobs in a hop supplier, for example. One of our graduates is working for Micigan Hop Alliance. So, you didn't really see that coming when they were going through the program. I don't think that person did either. And then we've got folks that have gone into sales and also people are working on the floors of the breweries as well. So there's a big, giant array of jobs that they can go find in our industry or even the ancillary industries that are out there. So I guess I didn't really see that coming, but I think it's pretty cool. So that's my kind of 2 cents on it.
Yeah. I mean, we just had what our program is fermentation science. So we're broader than just beer. We do have quite a focus on beer, as seen behind me here, but we do have students go off in those unexpected directions. We just had a recent graduate who had come back to us for a second degree. He'd had some engineering background before, and recently, a few months ago, I got a call from somebody I know in the biotech industry who has a company in Novi, and they supply reagents to research labs, but they needed a fermenter set up to help grow up these mammalian cells that produce one of their products. And I said, I know exactly which of our recent graduates is the person to come work for you to set up this fermenter. And so I got Pablo hooked up with this particular company, and that's that's the kind of thing that I think comes from getting sort of well integrated into the community around here, is that to tie it into your previous question, too, Fred. When you apprentice for somebody, that's maybe a little more of a limited network right there. But when you come to an academic institution, those have a lot of tendrils going in different directions, a lot of other connections that you may not get from just that apprenticeship as well. So it's that connecting into a different network too is what helps to then help go off in maybe that unexpected direction.
That's actually huge, Cory and Fred. We get, and it's probably everyone on this panel does, we get people calling us constantly or emailing us saying, we have an opening, advertise it, do you have anyone in mind? And it's not just brewing openings too, it's, distributor, brewery sales reps, just many different things. So a huge part of what we do is network. A huge part. And exposure. One thing pre-COVID that I used to do every semester was have a social evening where I would invite people in to talk that are in other areas of our industry outside of brewing. So I've had Motor City Malt come in, and I've had Sean from Top Hops come in, and I've had people in marketing that work in breweries as marketers, and social network people, and just across the board industry, salespeople, retail people, someone that opened a beer store, industry professionals that outside of actual brewing. So this is what you can also consider. It's not just about working in a brewery, with this certificate and with the Cicerone certification that you get, and the networking. If this is your passion, you can go on to do many other things in the industry outside of actually working in a brewery.
Yeah, and I'd like to comment too that, as everybody knows, brewing is a very popular thing. Everybody loves beer. People think it's like this romantic thing with beer. And so we get a lot of people that come in that want to be a brewer, and they start doing it. And it's like, oh, you mean I got to stick my hand down in that drain, or I've got to drag this hose around all day, or, I don't want to do that. And so they still have this love and interest for this product, but where can you go? And I think you have to have this open mind when teaching and having people understand that we have a bunch of different things that feed into brewing. Sales, we've placed someone in marketing, a marketing position. We have a graduate right now working at CalSec as a scientist doing hop extracts. There are just so many supporting roles. It's not just the brewer, but that's what draws people in, and opening up their mind, and also breaking their heart by saying, a brewer, you work long hours, you get paid in beer, and you're going to sweat and bleed and drag stuff around and lift heavy things. It's not this I sit and drink beer all day sort of position, even though we all wish it was. So,
and here most of you heard that and said, I'm in. I also think, I think we'll close with this, with a little talk around the idea of, I think that another interesting component is that having done a lot of education for consumers, whether that's just teaching beer and food pairing for a 1 hour, 2 hour session, and that sort of thing. I think one interesting component is no matter what you find out, like you are, all of us, I think, have experienced, an enriched life by understanding flavor and the creation of flavor and the marriage of flavor. I think as human beings, this is a quality of life topic where we're a species that prepares food and drink for pleasure, we're enthralled with it. It's beautiful. And so no matter what you find out it does for your career, you end up with an opportunity to explore flavor and food and drink in your own life in a more enhanced way. And so I think that it has this other side of this can just deepen your appreciation for beer and brewing and food and drink, even if it doesn't turn into a career. And there's a lot of education. There's a lot of hours of education that contribute to people's lives in that way. So I guess I'll just open up for any comments around that idea of the invitation. Who should consider, what type of people should consider looking into a program, and where would they start? What would I guess it'll be a multi-pronged question, but I'm also wondering, how would people begin a conversation with a school, with a program, and find the right fit for them? And what are some of the invitations for people, pros and not, professionals and not?
I just think it's passion based. If you have a passion for this product, whether you are a professional brewer, a weekend warrior home brewer, or someone that's just really enjoying the quality of beer that they're drinking around the state, come in, brew with us a couple times. Well, once COVID's done, come in, join our brew club, hang out for a little bit, learn something, and see if it's something that you enjoy. Brew 100, that's kind of why we formed that class. Is we're a community college. It's cheap to come in. It's not a huge time commitment, and see if you enjoy it. I think that's the easiest answer is get your feet wet in the industry somehow. And then if you really want to, get an education. It's going to overall, I think, excel your process through the apprenticeship system and make you better prepared for what's to come in the industry. So.
Well, and as I mentioned, a lot of my students are degree-seeking students, and they're just filling out their senior year, taking my classes for fun initially. And a lot of them have only had the Bud Light, Busch Light, and they come in, taste these beers that they haven't even heard of before. And they end up learning so much and learning to appreciate the industry and learning everything that's out there. One of my more successful students came in, she didn't even like beer when she started it. She was just taking it. She was a microbiology major. She was thinking, maybe I'll learn to like it. She's now working in a lab in a brewery here in Michigan. She made a career out of it. She loves beer. Her dad's really happy that she's working in a brewery. But there's just so much to learn. And one of the things that I love that we brew here at Hunter's Ale House, we don't have our own brewery on campus. We put equipment, we've installed some equipment in here that the students brew on, and they serve it here in the commercial environment, and they occasionally host beer and food dinners. So we do get to recommend things and menus and get to enjoy the food and the beer paired together.
So I want to say, like, for anyone interested, I mean, look where you live and look what's closest to you and just reach out to people there. See if there's any kind of intro class. At Schoolcraft, we do continuing education classes as well. They're not directly linked to the brewing program, but that could be a place to start. I teach those, and our brewing science teacher is going to be starting to teach too in the fall. And Fred, you might be involved in that as well. That could be a place to start with, doing some basic beer and then talking to the instructors, and, we can show you tours of the campus, contact us. We're happy to talk about beer, see what's right for you. And again, where are you in your life? Do you want to do a certificate course, or do you want to actually invest in a full degree? So, all these things can gear you towards where you want to be. Are you just starting out in your career, or are you about to retire from a corporate career looking for a second career? We have quite a few students that do that too. They've been passionate homebrewers their whole life, and they're finishing up their corporate careers and they retiring early, and they want to continue, maybe open their own brewery. A lot of them change their mind again, but maybe just get a part-time gig in a brewery once they've retired from a career. So just look at where you're going and what suits you, and there are many, many ways to get into that. And it gets, start close to where you live. If you live in Grand Rapids, go and see KVCC or GRCC, et cetera, et cetera.
I'd just echo that. Come take any of our intro courses. Our intro from 101 has 0 prereqs. If you're admitted to Eastern, you can take that class, and you can ask me all the questions that you could ever want, just to try and get an idea of where you're going. And just by taking that class, none of us are going to force you to to complete a degree either. So come try it out and see what you think.
Yeah, I would kind of, second everything everyone said. And I think don't be intimidated by going back to school or just exploring it. I think anyone on this call would be open to helping you navigate the process. I think that's one thing that I find student advising is some students they don't even know where to start, but sometimes it's literally just sending that email and saying, hey, like, walk me through this. And don't be afraid to do that. And at GRCC, you can do a non-degree seeking, so you don't even have to go through the whole application process. If you just want to do it for fun, you can come in and do that and learn. We have a number of students that come in and it's their second career and they just, want to learn to be a better home brewer or want a part-time job to keep them out of the house. So just don't be afraid to start that conversation.
Women too, any women out there. I want to say that our very first class was 50% women, which was fantastic. They haven't all been since, but that was our very first class. So I'm always, encouraging women to explore the program. We've had a lot of women in the program and female instructors. Two of our instructors are women in our small group.
That's awesome. Well, I can tell you that, it's exciting for me, having been in the Michigan brewing scene for a long time. I feel like we kept passing thresholds that we hadn't previously thought possible in terms of changing the beer market, in terms of the number of breweries, in terms of the, different styles and personalities across those breweries and the people. And the sense of camaraderie and collaboration and community has been celebrated, especially through the Michigan Brewers Guild, who's part of this podcast. And it's just been a highlight for me. And it's something that I love about Michigan. I love about our brewing community. And it's a great thrill to see it here in a new part, newish part of our industry, is that here we have another version of lots of choices, lots of personalities, lots of different specializations in brewing education across this great beer state. So I just want to thank you all for putting your energy into that and continuing to expand what Michigan brewing community looks like, and keep it so exciting and interesting, and inviting more people to be a part of it through your efforts and your education. So thank you all for being part of that and doing that. It's really exciting to see, and I appreciate the conversation here today. So
Thanks for having us, Fred.
Cheers to the great beer state.
Cheers.
Cheers.
We'll look forward to catching you all soon. Thanks for listening and sharing while supporting Michigan breweries and craft beer everywhere. The Michigan Brewers Guild was formed in 1997 with its first summer beer festival taking place in July of 1998. Its now 5 annual festivals are dedicated exclusively to Michigan beer brewed by more than 270 member breweries. The Michigan Brewers Guild exists to promote and protect the passionate Michigan beer industry in every way possible. To learn more, visit us at mibeer.com or say hello on one of our social media pages, as we love hearing from you. From coast to coast, from far and near, let's drink Michigan beer.